And marketers are increasingly using social media to get their messages out, but the growth of sites like Facebook and Twitter are leading the Federal Trade Commission to issue new guidelines for social and digital media. Here with more is John Norling, an attorney from Jennings, Strouss, and Salmon. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ted. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so FTC is updating guidelines. Is this just for online, just for social media? What's going on here?
Well, the FTC's recently issued the guidelines specifically directed at online media and our online advertising and social media. You know, the digital marketing industry in the United States is quickly approaching $50 billion, and it's expected that by 2016 it will surpass, the money spent on digital advertising will surpass the money spent on TV advertising now.
My goodness.
So right now, businesses are operating in a vacuum. They don't have the guidance until recently.
And this was the first time, I think, the first update on ads and marketing, what, how many years?
Well, it depends which you look at.
Yeah.
The most recent update was on the endorsements side of things, and that was, I think, the first since 2010. The guidelines for online advertising, what the FTC calls the .com advertising, is that was updated for the first time since the year 2000.
Wow. Time for an update.
In the technology world, you're right.
You know, okay. Guidelines, the emphasis I think would be rather obvious. Tell the truth. Don't be misleading or don't lie, correct?
Absolutely. Truth in advertising, that's a theme that prevails everything. The new guidelines aren't the law. And I want to make that clear, is the guidelines that the FTC has offered are just that, guidelines. It's the FTC's interpretation of what it takes to comply with the law. The actual law that the FTC enforces is called the Federal Trade Commission Act, the FTC Act, and that has a very broad statute that the FTC uses, and it declares anything that is deceptive or unfair as an unlawful practice. Well, it's a pretty broad statement.
Yeah.
So the FTC needs to issue some guidelines to tell the businesses how do you advertise and what constitutes deception or what constitutes unfairness. So
in the online world, is what constitutes as being unfair or deceptive any different than radio, television?
No, the difference is how it's conveyed, because let's say a Twitter advertisement, we only have 140 characters, so how do you make the proper disclosures in that? You know, you can have somebody issue a tweet that says, I've lost, 40 pounds on this diet pill I've taken one day a week for 2 days. Well, that's an endorsement. It needs to be specified as such, and you need to have a hashtag ad or something in there to show that it's an advertisement. How
about substantiating claims? Let's say that I've taken this pill and I'm now a Superman or something like that.
Absolutely.
How much substantiation has to occur? Well,
the advertiser needs to have the empirical data to back up its claims. But in the ad itself, let's take the weight loss scenario. If you have a claim that says I lost 60 pounds in 4 weeks, this pill, if those results are not typical, then that ad needs to say typical results would be 1 pound a week.
Yeah.
Or it needs to disclaim that this person exercised 6 hours a day, drank the protein shakes and only ate raw vegetables. Something to show the consumer that those advertisements are, or those results aren't typical.
How are these violations found or reported, and how are they endorsed? If anyone can go online and say that this weight loss plan works, who enforces, who investigates, who watches over this kind of thing?
Well, a number of different areas. One is, because it's online now, it's low-hanging fruit for the regulators. They can sit in their office and they can surf the net and they can look at these advertisements and basically from the comfort of their own desk find a host full of violations. It's not like the old days when everybody depended on direct mail marketing, where they actually had to get their hand on a piece of the mail collateral. Another way that people get, or the advertising violations get found, is by competitors.
Yeah.
Competitors turn each other in. It's a cutthroat business out there.
I bet they do. What happens? What are the consequences here? First offense, second offense, any difference?
Yes and no. It depends on the gravity of the issue. Under the Federal Trade Commission Act, the FTC can issue what's called a civil investigative demand, where they will send out basically a subpoena for every ad you've run the last 5 years. They want it's very extensive and very exhaustive, and then they'll do their investigation. And sometimes it takes 2-3 years for the investigation. That typically ends up with some type of settlement through a consent judgment where the parties will agree that the advertiser will not take certain actions, won't violate the law, will comply with the law. And that's typically it. However, sometimes they include reporting requirements. Some in the automotive sector have required reporting requirements where the advertiser has to submit quarterly reports for 20 years to the FTC. And then if they step afoul or run afoul of the consent order, then it could lead to a violation of $16,000 per day per violation.
My goodness. How often do businesses get hit for this?
Well, just a short glance this morning, I saw Anheuser-Busch, Gerber, Land's End, and GNC all embroiled in some type of advertising enforcement action, whether it be instituted by the Federal Trade Commission or a state Attorney General's office or a private consumer class action.
Interesting. All right, so with that in mind, whether you're a big business like the ones you just mentioned or a small business and you're out there watching right now and you're going, well, I want to use Twitter, I want to use Facebook and digital media to get my message out, what kind of advice do you have?
Truth in advertising. Make sure that you convey, or your advertisements are truthful, not misleading, that they can be substantiated. If you make a claim, you better have the backup to support it, and that it is clear and understandable. If there's a material fact that would be relevant to the consumer's buying decision, make sure it's in the ad, make sure it's disclosed properly. You know, they talk about the disclosures being clearly and conspicuously made. You don't bury it in the fine print at the bottom. You don't put it, if it's an audio ad, you don't put it in the rapid fire disclosures where nobody can understand it. It's read in the light speed. Make sure that it's included in the text of the ad if possible. And make sure it's as clear and as easily understandable as possible.
That all makes sense. That all seems like common sense. So why did it need I mean, what happened between 2002 and now? What needed updating? Or 2000, I should say.
Well, 2000, Twitter wasn't
I guess that's
around.
True, right? Yeah.
YouTube wasn't utilized. I mean, the digital marketing has been a recent phenomenon. People live on their cell phones. People live on their mobile devices. Advertisers know that that's where they need to get the ads out. People aren't reading the newspapers anymore. You can see that by the thickness of the newspapers. With the digital marketing going to exceed the spend on television advertising by as early as next year, you know, they're estimating that the spend will be 30 to 40% of the advertising dollar by 2019 will be digital.
So regardless of the platform, just tell the truth.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Good to have you here.